Who was the immortal Sith Lord that could not be killed? One thing that the Sith consistently chased besides pure power is the secret to immortality. Over the course of history, a handful of Sith had discovered various means by which to escape death. The most reliable method was that of essence transfer, but Vitiate had found another way through a ritual, one that stripped one of all of their mortality, leaving them an emotionless husk of pain and agony in exchange for life. But one Sith Lord stumbled upon his own method when he was on the verge of death. Because the reoccurring theme in today's holocron is that of pain, we are talking about the Darth Lord, Darth Sion, the Lord of Pain, the Sith that no one could kill. When speaking of the events of the first Jedi Purge, many are quick to regard the power and accomplishments of Darth Nihilus, who was the reigning Lord of the Sith. But the man who is often either offhandedly mentioned or swept under the rug entirely is Nihilus's companion, Darth Sion. This man had just as much to do with the deaths of the Jedi Order as Nihilus did, and he was a walking horror in and of himself. So let's today open a holocron and discuss the life and power of the Lord of Pain. Our story today begins during the last of the old Sith Wars, when Exile was the reigning Dark Lord. Darth Sion was initially a follower of Kun during his time as the Sith Lord, fighting against the Jedi Order as what is known as a Sith Marauder. In truth, he was a man who had mostly given up on life and had joined Exile because he wanted to seek out his own death. He hated the constant pain that came along with being alive and decided to end it all by going to war, tired of the physical, and more so, the emotional pain. He wanted to die. However, during his constant battles, he kept somehow surviving each of them. Each encounter he had with the Jedi ended with his own survival instead of the noble death that he so desperately clung towards. Sion found this to be interesting and began to believe himself to be truly immortal. His hatred for pain was there and seething, but he chugged on, continuing to fight in more battles. However, there would come a time when he was finally struck down in battle, and it was there, on the verge of death, that he had wished for so long to greet death as an old friend. But the pain of his wounds reached unbearable, unprecedented levels. His hatred towards the pain fed off of it, and the dark side responded in kind. Darth Sion literally rose from the grave in a flurry of rage and murdered the Jedi that had struck him down. As he stood there in overwhelming agony, Sion realized that it was the dark side that was holding his body together, and that any injury that he would suffer, that he could continue fighting, even after lethal wounds. The pain was never-ending, excruciating, but then he realized that instead of hating the pain, that he needed to embrace it. The cost, though, was not only an agonizing existence, but he had to constantly keep his rage going in order to sustain this power, and thus began the journey of Darth Sion. Exar Kun would eventually fall at the end of the old Sith Wars, but Sion decided that he wasn't done with battle just yet. He would participate in the background of the Mandalorian War, shaping himself into a stronger warrior. This was until Revan and Malak revitalized the Sith, and Sion joined them under their cause, now fully devoted to Revan. At the Sith Academy of Korriban, Sion learned how to hone his powers and become even stronger, constantly seething with pain and hatred. Although he was ready to continue making the Sith Order stronger, he was shocked to find out about the betrayal of Revan and the death of Darth Malak. The Sith Order would crumble around him as he stood on the sands of Korriban and watched his Sith brethren turn against one another. Once again surviving the chaos though, Sion would escape all of the backstabbing and continue his path. Sion had lived for many years and sustained so many injuries at this point that his body was now a walking abomination. His flesh was cracked and decomposing. His skeleton was fractured into thousands of pieces from all the times his bones had been broken and then reassembled. Although he had built up a tolerance to the pain, his life was a vile existence. Sion would be dead in hundreds of different ways, but he constantly held his body together with the dark side, refusing to die. He chose to embody his pain rather than tolerate it as a normal part of existence, turning it into something greater. Sion fed upon his pain for sustenance, and he sought to spread it all to the Jedi from across the galaxy. Sion now believed that his body and the galaxy were broken and needed to be mended. He was enraged by those who saw that they had power to fix the galaxy, but refused to, inspired by the words of Revan. Eventually, it would be Darth Traya who would find Nihilus, bringing them together to form an alliance known as the Sith Triumvirate. Her promise was that they would combine their strength to finally topple the Jedi Order and put the Sith back on top. Traya taught Nihilus and Sion the ways of the dark side, training them to grow even stronger. However, the two of them grew weary of Traya, tired of her confounding riddles and mysterious teachings, as the two Sith grew frustrated and decided to murder her and betray her. Coming together though, they decided to do something more cruel, as they stripped her of the Force. Now, with the two of them, they went on a rampage against the Jedi. No clones, no Order 66. These two Sith alone would systematically hunt down and destroy the members of the Jedi Order. While Nihilus satiated himself with the feeding of the Force energy of the Jedi, Darth Sion decided to allow his blade to feast on their lives. He was repeatedly struck down again and again by Jedi foes, but each and every time he rose and continued the slaughter. He was a monster born out of the depths of darkness, a nightmare that could be seen but never killed, an unstoppable force of evil that no Jedi could overcome. Finally, their campaign would begin to slow, as the Jedi went nearly extinct, and the galaxy entered the darkest era it had ever seen. Jedi Master Atris would attempt to draw the Sith out of hiding, bringing them into a trap where she could murder the two of them in one location, spreading a rumor that she was the last of the Jedi. Meetra Surik, though, a former companion of Revan's, had previously separated herself from the Force, and she now lived as an exile, traveling aboard a ship in the unknown regions. Darth Sion would be successfully enticed by the idea of killing the last of the Jedi, and he would attack her Republic vessel, using just himself and a group of assassins. He had pretended to be a corpse in an abandoned ship floating through space, as the Republic vessel brought him on to seek medical attention. But once aboard, he broke out of his tank and began a rampage, looking for Meetra. With the help of Kreia though, who happened to be on the ship at the same time, Meetra would escape the wrath of Darth Sion. Sion though was bloodlusted and continued to chase the Jedi, finally able to confront Meetra Surik on, appropriately, Korriban. The two engaged in a duel within the old temple, but no matter how many times Meetra struck the Dark Lord down, he would always rise again. Eventually, Meetra realized she was not going to be able to defeat him, and it is then where Sion warned Meetra about Kreia, telling her that the woman would destroy her. Meetra fled the battle, but interestingly enough, Sion didn't pursue, and even called off his assassins. He had found admiration and respect in the way that she fought him, but secretly, Sion found Meetra Surik to be beautiful and began to develop a romantic interest in her. However, he was disgusted by these sudden feelings of love, as they began to weaken his dark abilities and his ability to keep his very body together through pain. He saw beauty now in the galaxy, and he hated it. He quickly restored his form by learning to hate the new, positive emotions. However, Meetra continued to dominate his thoughts, no matter how much he hated it. Eventually, Sion would return to Malachor 5 when he realized that Nihilus had been defeated, and Kreia had returned as now Darth Traya. She would bend Sion to her will, and tell him to prepare for Meetra's arrival, as Meetra would land on Malachor and fight her way through the Sith forces in order to stop whatever plan Traya had in mind. This is when she confronted Sion for a final time. Now bent to Traya's will, Darth Sion engaged Meetra Surik in a duel, believing that if he killed her and proved his loyalty to Traya, that she would complete his training and make him even more powerful. He warned Meetra to leave though, telling her that Traya would only break her as Traya had now broken him. But Meetra would not relent and continued to strike down Sion again and again, while trying to reason with him, stating that Traya didn't care about him and only saw him as a weapon. Darth Sion remained defiant and continued to duel even after being felled 3 and 4 times. On the 4th defeat, he claimed that he would never lose, but that Surik told him that Traya would never truly help him, because Darth Traya wanted to free everyone of the Force, and she had no use for someone like Darth Sion, who relied on it for life. It was in this moment, that Scion realized the life of pain that he had given himself was one of permanent weakness and dependence instead of power. Mitra convinced him to let go of his immortality and submit to death for a final time. Here, Scion finally did so, allowing himself to feel peace for the first time in his entire life. In his last words, he was glad to finally be leaving the living world behind, and he became one with the Force. In a shocking turn of events, the Lord of Pain, the immortal Sith Lord that no man nor Jedi could kill, would leave this world of his own volition, convinced by the words of the only person he ever cared for. Scion is an interesting case because unlike Nihilus, who stayed truly consumed in the darkness until the end, Scion allowed the glimmer of hope to reach into his life. Despite everything he stood for in a leading life of devotion to the Sith, he had lived a life of futility and decided to give in to peace after all of the agony. Scion is one of the only Sith in history to have a somewhat peaceful death and even grow to have romantic feelings for another, one of the only Sith to fall in love with a Jedi. Though this idea is admittedly short-lived and is not really developed or explored further than I would have liked to, but it is still astounding that someone even as steeped in pain, hatred, and undeath like Scion wasn't too far enough to be redeemed. But anyway, my friends, what are your thoughts on the Lord of Pain? Would you have wanted more time given his romantic interest in Mitra Surik? And had you heard of him before this holocron? As always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the channel today, and may the Force be with you.